It's 3 a.m. in northern Alberta. The thermometer reads -50. Outside, diesel is thickening into jelly, and steel is shrinking so hard the truck creaks in the dark. And inside the sleeper cab, a driver is asleep in a t-shirt, warm, comfortable, breathing slow. One thin wall separates a man in a t-shirt from a cold that would kill him in under 15 minutes. Tonight, we find out exactly how that wall holds. Here is the strange part. You would think that on the coldest night of the year, a trucker's biggest enemy is the cold pressing in from outside. It isn't. His biggest enemy is silence. The moment that engine goes quiet, a clock starts ticking, and if he makes the wrong choice about how to survive the night, he might wake up to a truck that will not start, a battery that is dead, and a fuel tank full of something closer to wax than liquid. So how does he sleep through it? Why does he leave the engine running when fuel costs money, and the truck is going nowhere? What happens to diesel at 50 below? And why can't he just bundle up in blankets like the rest of us? And why, on the worst nights, is turning the engine off the single most dangerous thing he could do? Let's spend one night inside this machine, from dusk to dawn, and find out. Before we climb into that cab, if you like the hidden engineering behind the machines and the people who keep our world moving, subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. Now back to the cold. The sun is already gone. This far north in January, daylight is a rumor. A few gray hours around noon, and then darkness for the rest of it. Our driver pulls off the highway into a truck stop, a flat sheet of ice under sodium lamps. Dozens of rigs parked in rows with their exhaust stacks trailing thin ribbons of white smoke straight up into the still air. He has been driving for 11 hours. His body wants to stop. But before he can rest, he has work to do that most people never think about, because at 50 below, parking a truck is not just pulling the brake and walking away. It is a survival procedure. The first thing he does is not turn the engine off. He leaves it running. And that single decision, one that looks like pure waste, is the reason he will still have a working truck in the morning. Here's something almost nobody outside of trucking understands. At normal temperatures, you shut an engine off to save fuel. At 50 below, shutting it off can destroy it. Diesel fuel has a hidden weakness. As it gets colder, the paraffin wax naturally dissolved in the fuel begins to crystallize. Around -10 Celsius, tiny wax crystals start to form. By -30, they clump together into a thick, cloudy sludge. And somewhere past -40, untreated diesel stops flowing altogether. It gels. Picture pouring cold honey, then picture it setting like candle wax inside the fuel lines, clogging the filter, starving the engine. A truck with gelled fuel is not a truck anymore. It is a very large, very cold paperweight. A running engine fights this. It keeps warm fuel circulating. It keeps the coolant hot. It keeps the battery charged and the oil thin enough to move. Stop the engine, and all of that heat bleeds away into the night in a matter of hours. The oil thickens toward tar. The coolant, if it isn't mixed exactly right, edges toward freezing and can crack the engine block from the inside. The battery, already weak in the cold, may not have the punch left to turn a stiff, cold engine over in the morning. So the fuel that looks wasted, idling all night, is not waste at all. It is insurance. Burning 10 or 15 liters of diesel overnight is far cheaper than a cracked block, a dead battery, or a tow truck that may take 6 hours to reach you on a highway where the next town is 200 kilometers away. Now here is the twist that changes everything. You would assume that at 50 below, the enemy is the cold biting at human skin. It isn't. The cold doesn't attack the body first. It attacks systems. It attacks the diesel that won't flow, the rubber seals that turn brittle and crack, the grease in the wheel bearings that stiffens into glue, the air lines for the brakes where a single drop of trapped moisture can freeze into an ice plug and lock the brakes solid. The real enemy is not discomfort. It is failure you cannot see until it is too late. A driver can be perfectly warm in his bunk and still be in danger, because while he sleeps, the machine around him is under a slow, silent assault. Every rubber hose is getting harder. Every fluid is getting thicker. Every gap in the metal is widening as the steel contracts. And this is why the experienced driver treats the cold not as a discomfort to endure, but as an opponent to outthink. He isn't trying to survive being cold. He is trying to keep a complicated machine alive through a night that is actively trying to kill it. Inside the cab now, the driver eats something hot: soup, noodles, coffee that steams the instant the lid comes off. Warm food at 50 below isn't a luxury. A well-fed body generates its own heat, and heat is currency out here. But notice what's keeping this cab warm. It's not the truck's main engine roaring away just to warm the bunk. Many modern trucks carry a second tiny heater, a bunk heater, sometimes called a diesel-fired air heater. It's roughly the size of a shoebox, tucked under the bed, and it sips fuel. It draws a little diesel, ignites it in a small chamber, and blows warm air into the sleeper, using perhaps a tenth of the fuel that idling the whole engine would burn. This is the quiet genius of the modern rig. The driver can, on some nights, shut the giant main engine down and let the little heater carry the sleeper through till morning, as long as the temperature isn't so extreme that the fuel and the engine itself are at risk. On a mild winter night, -15, -20, the bunk heater is enough. But tonight is -50. Tonight the calculation changes, and the main engine stays alive too, because tonight, the fuel and the block need heat as badly as the driver does. So why not simply shut everything down, pile on 10 blankets, and sleep like a person camping in the snow? Because a human body is a weak little furnace. At rest, asleep, you produce roughly 100 watts of heat, about the same as a bright old light bulb. That is nothing against -50. Blankets only slow the loss of your own body heat. They generate none of their own. In a metal box with no heat source, wrapped in the best sleeping bag money can buy, a sleeping person's core temperature would begin its slow slide downward. And the cruelest part of hypothermia is that as it sets in, you stop feeling cold. You feel warm. You feel drowsy. You feel like everything is fine. People who freeze to death often do so peacefully, convinced they are comfortable, sometimes even taking their clothes off, in a final confused burst of false warmth. That is why the driver does not gamble on blankets alone. Blankets are his backup, not his plan. His plan is a heat source that runs whether he is awake or not. The idling engine, the bunk heater, a system that does not get tired, does not fall asleep, and does not stop producing heat just because the human inside has closed his eyes. Before he lies down, there's a checklist. Small habits that separate the drivers who wake up and drive away from the ones who wake up and wait 6 hours for help. He has plugged in the block heater if shore power is available, an electric element that keeps the engine's coolant warm from an outside outlet, so the metal never gets truly cold. He has made sure his fuel is winterized, treated with an anti-gel additive, or that he filled up with the special winter blend diesel that stations this far north sell by default. He has cracked a window, just slightly, counterintuitive again. With an engine or heater running, a sealed cab risks the invisible killer, carbon monoxide, seeping in from a cracked exhaust or a bad seal. A tiny gap of fresh air is the difference between waking up and not. He is parked nose into the wind, or nose away from it, depending on where the exhaust vents. He has checked that his exhaust stack is clear of snow, and he has left his phone and a spare battery inside the sleeper, close to his body. Because lithium batteries die fast in the cold, and a dead phone at -50 on an empty highway is its own kind of emergency. None of this is glamorous. All of it is survival. This is the hour when it bites hardest. In the small hours, the temperature bottoms out. The truck stop has gone silent except for the low, endless drone of dozens of idling engines, a sound so constant the drivers stop hearing it. Steam rises from every stack. Frost has grown across the windshields in feathery white ferns. Out here, the numbers stop being abstract. At -50, bare skin can freeze in under 2 minutes. A cup of boiling water thrown into the air turns to ice crystals before it lands. The steel of the truck's frame has physically shrunk, contracted enough that panels creak and bolts feel loose. Tires, flattened where they've sat against the frozen ground for hours, have gone stiff and squared off. The first few kilometers of driving in the morning will thump like the truck has flat spots until the rubber warms and rounds out again. And through all of it, the engine idles on. A steady, stubborn heartbeat in a landscape that wants everything to stop. Inside, behind that one thin wall, the driver sleeps in his t-shirt, the bunk heater humming, the cab holding a steady 18 degrees. The machine is doing its job. It is keeping a human alive by refusing itself to fall asleep. Remember what we said at the start, that his real enemy isn't the cold, it's silence. Here is why. If that engine were to stall in the night, a fuel line finally gelling despite the treatment, a mechanical fault, anything, the driver would not necessarily wake up. He would sleep on, warm for a little while as the residual heat lingered. But within an hour or two, the cab temperature would begin to fall. And by the time it fell far enough to wake him, the engine might already be too cold to restart. Gelled fuel, a stiff, unwilling starter, a battery drained by the cold. Now he is awake, in the dark at -50, with a dead truck and no heat. This is the scenario every winter driver fears, and it is why the smartest of them don't sleep purely on trust. Some set alarms to wake and check. Some run their trucks in pairs, parked together, so that if one engine dies, the other driver is there. Some carry a backup heat source, a propane catalytic heater, an emergency sleeping bag rated for Arctic use, chemical hand warmers by the dozen. Because out here, redundancy isn't a luxury. It's the whole strategy. One system keeps you alive. A second system keeps you alive when the first one fails. And a driver who understands that sleeps a little more soundly. Not because the night is safe, but because he has planned for it not being safe. There is a loneliness to this that the engineering can't capture. The trucker at 50 below is not part of a crew. There is no second person in the cab checking his work, the way there is on a train or a ship. It is just him, one man, one machine, and a few hundred kilometers of frozen highway in every direction. Everything he has done tonight, the fuel treatment, the block heater, the cracked window, the running engine, the backup heater under the bunk. He did alone, from memory, from experience, from the hard lessons of drivers who came before him and, in some cases, didn't make it. This knowledge isn't written in a manual he studied once. It's passed down, driver to driver, over coffee at truck stops exactly like this one, in the shared understanding that the road this far north does not forgive carelessness. And when the alarm sounds and it's time to move again, no one will thank him. No one will know that the load of groceries, or fuel, or medicine he's carrying moved through a night at -50 because one person understood how to keep a machine breathing in the cold. That's the quiet truth of it. The work that keeps our shelves full happens in the dark, in the cold, out of sight. And it depends on knowledge most of us will never need to have. The first gray hint of morning. The driver stirs, pulls on layers, and steps out into a cold so sharp it feels solid, the air stinging his lungs. He walks the truck, checks the tires, still squared off and stiff, checks the fuel filter, the lines, the exhaust, knocks the frost from the mirrors. Then he climbs in, and the engine, which never stopped, settles from its overnight idle into a working growl. The oil is thin because it stayed warm. The fuel flows because it never gelled. The battery is strong because the alternator kept it fed all night. Everything works, in the morning, precisely because of the choices made the night before. He pulls back onto the highway. The tires thump for the first few kilometers, then smooth out as the rubber warms and rounds. Behind him, the truck stop empties one rig at a time, each one trailing its ribbon of white exhaust into a sky that is finally faintly turning blue. He survived the night. But if you asked him, he wouldn't call it surviving. He'd call it Tuesday. The cold does not care whether you're tired. The engine does not care whether it's the middle of the night. Out here, the machine and the person who runs it share the same single job. Keep going. No matter what the temperature says, keep the fuel flowing, keep the heat coming, keep breathing, slow and steady, behind one thin wall. Most of us will never see this. We'll never sleep in a t-shirt while the world outside sits at 50 below. Never feel steel shrink around us in the dark. Never learn that the most dangerous sound on the coldest night is silence. But every product on our shelves, every tank of fuel, every box of medicine, at some point it moved through a night exactly like this one, carried by a machine that refused to stop, and a person who knew exactly how to keep it that way. And maybe that's the real lesson of the cold. It doesn't reward strength. It rewards preparation. The driver doesn't beat the cold by being tougher than it. He beats it by understanding it, by knowing, before the sun even sets, everything the night is going to try to do to him, and having an answer ready for each one. If you made it all the way to morning with us, hit that like button. It tells me you want more of these deep dives into the machines that move our world. And tell me in the comments, could you do it? One night, alone, in a cab at 50 below, with nothing but a running engine between you and the cold. I read every reply. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Because next time, we're climbing aboard something even bigger. Stay warm out there.